school studies in Sufism. In this fourth lesson or session, as you prefer, we will have Federico Salvaggio, who holds a PhD in Arabic linguistics from the University of Genoa in Italy, and currently is a postdoc research fellow in linguistics at the University of Udine in Italy again, and a lecturer in Arabic language and translation at the University of Trieste. His research interests focus on the Islamic linguistic thought. His publications mainly deal with the ideological and symbolic dimensions related to linguistic sciences and their transmission in the Arab and Islamic world. Just to mention a couple of his most recent publications, one is called Paretymologies in the Fusus al-Hikam in the light of Ibn Arabi's hermeneutic principle, and Polysemy as a hermeneutic key in Ibn Arabi's Fusus al-Hikam. So Federico, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation. Welcome to everybody. Just going to share. Can you see my presentation? Is it okay?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. So we are going to discuss today human perfection in Quranic terms, definition, context, and interpretation. Well, sorry, just a minute. Okay. Okay. So first of all, we're going to look at how human perfection is seen from the Quranic perspective. And in order to do that, we are going to look at the terms that are used to refer to man in the Quran, to the definitions of those terms, to the etymologies, and to the meanings. And of course, when one deals with the Quran, it is very important to put words into context. And so to look at the actual Quranic passages where those particular words recur. So we're going to look also at the Quranic context of those words. They can convey, as we will see, very often a particular connotation of meaning. Now, Izutsu has a very interesting book about this, which is called God and Man in the Quran, and it is an introduction to the semantics of the Quran. And in that book, he presents his theory of the relational meaning, the meaning that words acquire when they are put into a context, and the way in which different words put together influence the meaning of a word. And then, of course, we're going to look at Ibn Arabi's interpretation of those Quranic terms and passages. And let us say this from the beginning, very often these interpretations are not based on the more evident and apparent meaning of those words, but very often are based on secondary meaning or derived meanings or on hidden meanings that are not so clear at the first sight. Well, as you might have already guessed, this presentation will be different to the others presented in this summer school, in that I will mostly concentrate on linguistic issues. The reason behind that is that I am not a specialist in Sufi studies, let alone Akbarian studies. And so I hope you will excuse me if I will just confine myself into the boundaries of the linguistic field. Of course, I don't consider myself an expert even in linguistics, but yes, the linguistic field is the domain of research that I am most familiar with. So I will just so that's the approach that I'm going to use. But in doing that, I am comforted by the fact that we are honored this year by the presence of such great and outstanding scholars that, as you have already seen, have discussed and will be discussing all the subtleties of the metaphysical matters involved in the finest details. So there is really no need for me to do that and to venture into a field that is not exactly my comfort zone. But the other reason why I am confining myself to linguistic observations is, of course, related to the fact that Arabic has, and Quranic Arabic in particular, has a very central role in the development of Islamic thought, in the development of Sufi doctrines and of Akbarian doctrines in particular, as well as as a very strong influence on the Islamic civilization in general. So the role of the Arabic language can hardly be overestimated when the importance of the Arabic language, the understanding of the rules of the language, of the structure of the language, of the semantic of the terms, of the way they are written. We have seen examples today with Stephen Interstein. Everything that is about language is extremely important to understand Islam in general, Sufism and Akbarian studies. And in particular, Akbarian doctrines are very often built on and grounded in linguistic interpretations. It's okay, of course, it is not everything, but it's very often the starting point for the speculation and elaboration. So that's important. That's an important point. As this is also a summer school, and I know that many of you are are specialists in Arabic, so this doesn't apply to you. Many of you are native speakers of Arabic, but for those of you who don't know any Arabic, this could be the occasion to get a first idea of how important Arabic is to approach Sufi studies and Akbarian studies. And I suppose that you are interested in those and you want to know more about them if you're here. So there could be also an occasion that could spur your interest to develop your Arabic skills and to deepen your knowledge in the field. But of course, no panic. I'm not going to use, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. I'm going to present Arabic words in transcription, so Latin transcription to be precise. So I hope everybody can follow. So first thing first, what we will define Insan in the second part of this presentation. But first of all, let's say when we translate Insan, some translate it as man and some translate it as human being. As we will see, Insan is a non-gender specific term. So it applies to men and women. It's a term that really refers to humankind in general, human being in general. For these reasons, many scholars and many authors tend to avoid the translation by the word man, okay, and tend to prefer the translation with the expression the human being. The reason behind that is, of course, because in the English word man is a particularly ambiguous one. It can refer to an adult male human being, and it can also refer to a human being of either sex. So to avoid ambiguity, very often scholars tend to prefer the translation with human being. But now a second reason is, of course, that the latter use of the word man, the use of man as human being of either sex, is and has been contested by some because it appears too sexist, and it appears just unfair that a word that is normally referred to adult male humans should be extended to the entire humankind. So again, for those of you who are students, who are somehow engaged into the academic battlefield, you might be aware of the implications of either choices. So I'm not going to suggest anyone in particular. It's not for me to say that, but yes, warning, whatever you choose, you must be, of course, aware of the implication they have. Now, for the point of view of historical linguistics or etymology, the word male, both in English and other Germanic language and in Italian and other Latin languages, is derived from the word human being, and not the other way around. So it's not male derived from human. It's not human being derived from man, from male, but it's male derived from human being. And this is evident in English, where the word man comes from Old English man, which is human being, non-gender specific term, while Old English had its own term for a male. It was called were. We still find it in a word like werewolf. Werewolf is a man who changes itself into a wolf, normally in the full moon. And the same applies to Italian, uomo, and other related words, home in French and others. That comes from the Latin word homo, human being. Again, non-gender specific name, and which is for some related to the word humus, which means soil. Now, this will become relevant when we will address the etymology of the word Adam. And again, Latin has had its own term for male, that was vir. That is, of course, related to the Old English word. So in both languages, the notion of human being comes before that of male, or the word for male is derived from the general notion of human being. Now, a quick look to Sanskrit correspondences. I know that some of you are interested in comparative religion issues, and as it has been mentioned yesterday, the Hindu tradition has corresponding doctrines to that of the Insan al-Kamil, and so for some might be interesting also to have a very quick look at those terms. So the terms for human being in general, the one that is very significant in our context, is manu. Now, manu, it's of course related to the Old English man, so it's the same origin, and it's also the name Manu of the progenitor of mankind, which is sort of the Hindu equivalent of Adam, the progenitor of mankind in the Semitic translation, Semitic tradition, now or the Abrahamic tradition. Now, as for the word Purusha, this carries a number of meanings, and among them male, human being, and also person. Now, for example, Purusha is the term that is used in grammar to refer to person. So first person, second person, third person. In school is used the word Purusha, Pratama Purusha, Madhyama Purusha, Uttama Purusha, and so on. Now, the etymology is uncertain, but some refer it to the idea of producing, to produce. And of course, when we hear this, we think about Purusha in Prakriti, so Purusha being the active aspect, the productive aspect, and in Prakriti being the passive aspect. But for others, and that's quite interesting, it has to be related to the root pri. Now, pri means to make full or complete. So what's interesting here is it is in the word Purusha, there is a sort of synthesis of both ideas expressed by the expression al-insan al-kamil. Because you have the man, the human, and the meaning of Purusha is human, but also the kamal, the completion, because of the root that means to make full or complete. But this is it, and let's not indulge any further on comparative issues, and let's go back to our main topic, which is the Arabic language. We will start to look at what Insan does not stand for. And in order to do that, we were looking at alternative terms for man or human being used in the Quran. And then, as I said, we will come in the second part to the notion of Insan. So first of all, Insan is not Dhakar. So Dhakar is the term that in the Quran refers precisely to male. Now, when it occurs in the Quran, it's very often, regularly associated with Untha, the female. And this couple, Dhakar and Untha, is the couple that in the Arabic language express best the notion of masculine and feminine. It is used, for example, also in grammar to define grammatical gender, so mudhakkar and mu'annath. Now, in Semitic languages, what are Semitic languages? You might know that languages are divided into families. So we already mentioned the Latin family, which comprises Italian, French, Spanish, and so on. The Germanic, English, Dutch, German, and so on. And the Semitic languages, which includes Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, the language of Jesus, and other very old Semitic languages, of course, like Akkadian. Now, Akkadian was the language that was spoken, was one of the languages that was spoken in Babylon. So when we look at this root, and we have to say what is root, because some of you might not be familiar to this notion. So in Semitic languages, this idea of the root is very, very important. And it is often, and especially in the case of Arabic, but it applies to Semitic languages in general, it is very often a triliteral consonant root. Now, remember that when we refer to Arabic or other Semitic languages, the notion of letter, the notion of letter, the half, refers to consonant. So when we say triliteral consonant, triliteral roots, what we mean is a sequence of 3 consonants. Very important. So this root, or dhakara, okay, in Semitic languages carries 2 main ideas. One is the idea of male, we have already seen that, and the other one is the idea of memory, of remembrance. And so we have the Arabic dhakara, which means to remember. Then we have dhikr, which means remembers, and of course dhikr is used in a very specific sense in the religious practice. Dhikr is the repetition of certain words or formulas, very often in a specified number for religious purposes. Now, the equivalent word in Hebrew, zachar, carries both meanings as well. So male and remember. And the Akkadian zikrum corresponds exactly to the Arabic zikr. It means mention. Now, as a passing remark, we might want to compare this with what we heard yesterday from Gregory Van Dam about the common interpretation of Insan as Nisyan. We'll have to explain this. This is an interpretation based on the permutation of the consonant that make up the root of the word. So, so permuting, changing the place of the consonant, we go from Insan to Nisyan, which means forgetfulness. And so the idea is that as Insan is at the same time man and forgetfulness, Dhakar is man and remembrance. But that's all for it, because it's not, there is not much more to say about this in this context. Now, another term that is used to refer to man and male in the Quran is the word rajul. Now, it comes from a root, rajula, which means to go on foot. It is connected to the word foot or leg. We will see that in Semitic languages, The word for foot is also the word for leg, and the word for hand is also the word for arm. And in fact, the word for arm, for example, we will see it in a while. It's when it refers to animal, it's referred to the four legs, to the four limbs. Okay. So the words riju, foot again, and or leg, same as the Hebrew regel. And so this word is related to the idea of walking. So it's connected to the idea of rajul, the walker, the pedestrian. And of course, in some colloquial varieties of Arabic, you might know that Arabic has a fusha, a high variety, the let's say the standard Arabic. If it's a word, it's a term that needs some more explanations, but it's okay. And a colloquial Arabic, many forms of colloquial Arabic. So, for example, in Libyan Arabic, the way to refer to man is not rajul, but is rajul, exactly like walker or pedestrian. And this has some first attestation in South-Semitic as foot, soldier, or infantry. So there is this idea of a walking being, the walking being. Rajul and its opposite, imra, they always often come together in the Quran. It's also used in colloquial Arabic to refer to husband and wife. And you can have an equivalent of that in the Spanish mujer or the French femme. But the rajul is mentioned, as we said, very often in the Quran, together with imra, which is also the feminine form of another word for man or human being that is also used in the Quran, but we're not going to speak that much about it, which is mar. Okay, so this also. And we often find it in the Quran in the plural form. So a recurrent expression in the Quran is rijal wa nisa, men and women. Now, as we said, when we look at the Quranic context in which those words are used, the first things that we can see is that the word rijal has a very positive meaning in the Quran. Let's see a few examples. So the first number refers to the surah, and the second one to the verse or verses. So in one surah, we find one verse, we find this sentence: men, rijal, who love to purify themselves. It's a positive thing. Men, rijal, whom neither commerce nor sale distracts from the remembrance, dhikr, of God. Again, very positive connotation. Men, rijal, who were true to their covenant with God. Believing men, rijal, and believing women. So when we find the word rijal, it very often has a very positive connotation, a very high moral stance. Someone who is committed to what it does, someone who is faithful and truthful, and so on and so forth, who love to purify himself. And in fact, the term rijal in Sufism has a technical meaning, a specific meaning, and it's used, for example, to refer to the folk of God, rijal Allah. And for Ibn Arabi, so E-R-I-A always stands for Ibn Arabi, the term is synonymous with Al-Akabir, the great ones among the friends of God, amongst the Awliya Allah. And what's interesting is that Ibn Arabi applies the term to both women and men, which is very consistent with the etymology that we have described. Because after all, Rajul is only a standing human being. It's a human being on his feet. So it makes perfect sense. And it's always astonishing and to find that very often what we discover through the methods of comparative Semitic studies is consistent to some of Ibn Arabi's observations and linguistics analysis. It's always a great surprise. And then another, this expression was very common in Sufism as well, Arijal al-Kummal. Kummal is always from the same root of Kamil, okay, which is an expression referred to the perfect man. Now, if we now move to a more general term for human being in the Quran, the first term that we have to deal with is Adam. Now, Adam is, of course, the first man, the first prophet, the father of mankind. And the word comes from a Semitic root, which means human, but also conveys the idea of the red earth, the red soil, and also the idea of being red. Now, in both Arabic and Hebrew, the word for blood is dam. And dam is, of course, and blood is, of course, a red element. Now, it is a matter of dispute whether the fundamental idea, which is being red, is transferred to the red earth, and then the human comes from the red earth. So the sequence will be being red, and then red earth, and then because the man is made from clay, that's how it came. And so it would make a parallel with what we said before about homo, Latin homo, being connected with humus. But for other, both terms, for others, from both terms comes from the idea of being red. Some say perhaps because there is blood inside the human being, so that's why it's called red. Okay, and there might be other opinions. We could perhaps discuss them in the Q&A if somebody is interested. So how is Adam, the first man and the first prophet and the father of mankind, a term for human being in general? How is it so? Well, first of all, in Hebrew, the term Adam, human being, the term Adam stands for human being in general. Because in Hebrew, when you want to refer to a male or husband, we've seen how very often these terms, man and husband or woman and wife, are interchangeable, even in English, all right? So sorry, even in the etymology of the word wife in English, which was connected with the Old English weave, which meant a woman and a wife. Well, in Hebrew, when you want to refer to a man, a male, a husband, then you use another word, which is ish. Now, for some, this is related to the root of insan, it's a sort of Wiccan form, but for others, is a complete different root. So in Adam, in Hebrew, yes, the word Adam, it stands for human being. In Arabic, it's not so common to refer to man just by saying Adam, but you do say in Arabic, Ibn Adam, son of Adam, to say somebody, or Banu Adam, to say the humankind or the human being, which is, of course, an equivalent of the Hebrew expression Ben Adam. But what is interesting is that if we now look at the so-called Islamic languages, many of them adopted the term Adam from Arabic through Persian or through Turkish, but anyhow, the origin is Arabic, and they adopted this term precisely with the meaning of man. So either in the form Adam or in the adjective derived from Adam, which is Adami, and then there is also this contraction Admi. Okay, for example, in Hindi you say Admi. Now, Hindi is not exactly an Islamic language, but okay, you see what I mean. And by Islamic languages, of course, we are referring to the definition of Alessandro Bausani, which was one of the greatest scholars in Islamic studies, who considered an Islamic language the language of those peoples who adopted Islam and then integrated in their vocabularies hundreds and thousands of words of Arabic origin, very often of direct Quranic origin, and so forth and so on. And so Azerbaijani, Bengali, Hindi, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Persian, Punjabi, Swahili, Tatar, Turkish, Urdu, Uyghur, Uzbek, and many others use this word Adam to refer to man in general. Now, within the Akbarian school, the term Adam is also synonymous with the term Alam al-Insani, the human world. And this is, for example, a quotation from the Naqsh al-Fusus, which means the imprint or the patent of the basis of wisdom. This is a short summary of the Fusus al-Hikam, whose attribution to Ibn Arabi is disputed, although scholars like Chittik believe that it is actually Ibn Arabi's work, for the fact that it has been commented by Qunawi, that being one of the closest and the most direct disciples of Ibn Arabi, would certainly have known best which works were his masters. But of course, this is not my field, so if somebody has different opinion, I'll be happy to listen to them. But the fact that it has been commented by Qunawi and Jandi makes it and many others, makes it an important text within the Akbarian school. Now, the author of the Naqsh al-Fusus, the Akbarian author of the Naqsh al-Fusus, explicitly states that by Adam, I mean the existence of the human world. So, al-Alam al-Insani. So again, this interpretation inside the Akbarian school is extremely consistent with the philological or etymological interpretation of the word Adam. Now, to be more precise about the relation between Adam and Insan al-Kamil, and therefore between the name Adam and the word perfection, because after all, what we're looking for is the references to perfection in the Quran, to perfection of man in the Quran. The first, sorry, this is for the next slide. Well, anyhow, in the Akbarian school, this is we have to consider, of course, the first chapter of the Fusus al-Hikam, the chapter of Adam. This is a text that has been referred to in the last days, yesterday and today, of course, and that it will be surely referred to time and again in the next few days. It's a very fundamental passage. These are the opening, okay, the opening words of the chapter of Adam. But I thought that we perhaps could read it together, because it's a text that is worth reading in detail. So the text says, "The real world, glorified be He, in virtue of His beautiful names, which are innumerable, to see their identities. If you so wish, you can say to see His identity in a comprehensive being, Count Jami, that comprises the whole affair insofar as it is possessed of existence, and His mystery is manifest to Himself through it." And then the famous passage, "For the vision a thing has of itself in itself is not like the vision a thing has of itself in another thing, which will be like a mirror for it. Indeed, He is manifest to Himself in a form accorded by the locus seen, which would not have manifested to Him, without the existence of that locus and His self-disclosure to it." And then He says other things, and then we come to Adam. "The situation required that the mirror of the world be clear, and Adam was the very clearness of this mirror and the spirit of this form." So we can say how tightly related are the notion of Insan al-Kamil with that of the figure of Adam. A passing remark here is that the word mirror contains the same radical letters as the word mar'a, which is also one of the words that are used in the Quran to indicate man. Now, of course, they come from different root, because in the word mir'ah, which is mirror, the M is a prefix for the so-called nouns of instrument. It's an instrument. It's the instrument through which you see. Okay, so the root means to see, and mir'ah is the instrument that allows you to see, while in the word mar'a is part of the root. But again, there is this interesting correspondence. This is not Ibn Arabi's interpretation. It's just mine. So, but yeah, again, it is something that, from the point of view of the correspondences that Ibn Arabi very often makes, could make some sense. Now, the Quranic passages that deal with Adam, the most famous one, already been mentioned, is the passage in Surah Al-Baqarah, number 2. Okay, we could read it together, which is also relevant to our discussion for another reasons that we will see shortly. So, and when thy Lord said to the angels, I am setting in the earth a viceroy, Khalifa. They said, what, wilt thou set therein one who will do corruption there and shed blood, while we proclaim thy praise and call thee holy? He said, assuredly, I know that you know not. And he taught Adam the names, all of them. Then he presented them unto the angels and said, now tell me the names of these, if you speak truly. They said, glory be to thee. We know not save what thou hast taught us. Surely thou art the all-knowing, the all-wise. He said, Adam, tell them their names. And when he had told their names, he said, did I not tell you, I know the unseen things of the heavens and the earth? And I know what things you reveal and what you were hiding. And when we said to the angels, bow yourself to Adam, and they bowed themselves, save Iblis, he refused and waxed proud. And so he became one of the unbelievers. And then the story continues in a different surah. And said he, God, Iblis, what prevented thee to bow thyself before that I created with both my hands? We'll come back to this. Hast thou waxed proud, or art thou of the lofty ones? So we see the excellence, the primary role of Adam among all creatures, the angels that bow before Adam. Okay, so the passage is very illustrative of the specific, the unique status of man. But it's also interesting for us for this mention of the two hands. Now, the expression used is bi yadeya. Okay, yadeya comes from yad, as we said, is the Semitic word for the four limbs. Okay, it's for the hand or the arm, and it is in the dual form. That's essential. The dual form is the yes. We have to explain this. So in Arabic, as in ancient Greek or in Sanskrit, we have three numbers, grammatical numbers. Singular for one, of course, plural from three on, and then dual. So every time we have two things, two hands, two whatever, two eyes, we don't use the plural, not in standard Arabic, but we use the dual, okay, the dual form. So we'll come back to this again. And of course, sometimes it's not even necessary to translate with my two hands on both my hands, because this is an information that is included in the grammatical information, but that you don't have to actually translate when you translate. Because of course, in Arabic, when you want to focus or when you want to stress this, then you will even add the number 2. You will say something like bi yadeya al-ithnatayn. Okay, you will use the word ithnain in addition to this. So we'll come back to that. Just a minute. Now, moving to another non-gender specific term, we have to consider the word Basha in the Quran. That's a key word, and it's a very important one, and we will see that it's one for which Ibn Arabi has a very special interpretation. And again, it's a not gender-specific term. It means human being or mankind, but it is connected to a root from which you also have bashara, skin. So if we look to the Semitic context, for example, the Hebrew, then we find the equivalent term, basar, which means flesh, meat, body, person, skin, again, and nakedness. So the basic meaning of the word is connected with the idea of the body, the meat, the flesh, the skin, the corporal dimension of man, the physical and concrete nature of man. Okay, well, and so when we use the term Basha, we refer to man or human being in his physical, corporal, concrete terms. And this is quite evident in the Quran. Again, if we look at the passages and how the words are put together and stand together, in the Quran, when the word Basha is used, it can very often be translated with the expression just a man. It's just a man. So again, a few quotations. Ye are but mortals of his creating. Ye are but mortals like us. We are only men, Basha, like you. They say only mortal is teaching him, Basha. Say, I'm only a man, Basha, like you. This is not but a man, Basha, like yourself. So that's the Quranic context in which this word and this particular term appears. Now, what is Ibn Arabi's interpretation of the word Basha, and how is this connected to the idea of perfection? If we look to the chapter of Jesus in the Fusus al-Hikam, the word Basha, human being, is understood by Ibn Arabi in connection with let's say, a derived form from the same root, which is mubashara, which means direct contact, which is from the same root. So Basha, human being, is connected with the idea of direct contact. And Ibn Arabi explains, man is called Basha because it was created by direct contact of God's hands, biyadeya. So why is this important? Why is this a sign of perfection in man? If we have to consider another text by Ibn Arabi, which is the Risala Nuskat al-Haq, image or copy of the real, where he clarifies that when creation happens, it can happen through three main modalities. So the majority of creation is simply created by his kun, is of God, of course, kun, the be, the imperative of the verb to be. So majority of creation is simply created by just kun. The Garden of Eden, the kalam, is created by his kun and one hand. While man, yes, here we come to the perfection of man, is created by his kun and both God's hand. So again, biyadeya, by the hands, by the two hands. So that's the perfection. Why is this important? Is a sign of excellence, a sign of perfection, which is further explained in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, chapter 73, question 44. Very relevant to our subject, because the question says, Lima sammahu bashara. Why did he, God, call him Basha? So why did he call him Basha? Yeah, we can ask Ibn Arabi directly. When what he says is, okay, this is only a part of it, of course. Conditioned existence, al-wujud al-muqayyad, was called Basha because of the direct contact, mubashara, of its manifestation, for its manifestation between the absolute being, al-wujud al-mutlaq, and the immutable essences, al-ayana thabita. And that name Basha was reserved to man, Insan, because he is the most perfect Akmal in creation among all creatures. So again, we have the term, a term that is derived from the same root of Kamil. Is this a comparative of superlative form, Akmal? And so here we go. Ibn Arabi explicitly says that this name Basha implies the perfection, okay, the perfection of the human being among all the creatures, which is it's very strange somehow, because this is the term that, as we've seen, has to do with the corporal, the physical dimension of man, and then is exactly the term in which Ibn Arabi sees a sign of human perfection. So this is particularly significant. So this idea of the two hands, the dual in grammar, also has implication is a reference to the new dual nature of man, a dual nature that is interpreted within the Akbarian school as the synthesis of necessity and possibility, of beauty and majesty, of the form of the world and the form of the real, Surat al-Alam, Surat al-Haq. Well, now we have arrived to the word Insan. So what is Insan? Is a non-gender specific term, meaning human being or mankind. So it's applied to both men and women, sorry. Although we do have in colloquial Arabic the term insana, okay, to refer to a female person, but that's colloquial Arabic. Now, this term enters the vocabulary of Islamic languages, so it's found in Azerbaijani, Bengali, Hindi, Malay, Pashto, Persian, Sindhi, Swahili, Tajik, Tatar, Turkish, Urdu, Uyghur, Uzbek, and many others. Now, why is this relevant to our topic? It is relevant because it is a very peculiar long word. What is a long word? Now, bear with me just for a few remarks so that I can make my point. The languages tend to exchange words. They always do that. Okay, and the reason why they do that is either for need. Okay, there is a necessity. Okay, there's a new item coming into a language which doesn't have a name in my language, so I introduce the item in my vocabulary, sorry, in my life, in my habits, and I introduce the word in my vocabulary. Okay, so every name of food, you don't have a kebab, but you don't have lasagna in your culture. So you introduce the kebab in your diet, and you introduce kebab in your vocabulary. Now, the second reason is language prestige. Very often, foreign words sound better. Okay, make you sound more intelligent, more cultivated, more erudite, and so forth and so on. And so you introduce words just for language prestige. But every language has a core vocabulary which is not normally subject to lexical borrowing. So a word like man or person is really part of this basic core vocabulary that normally is not exchanged between languages. So the fact that these languages have included the word insan in their vocabularies means, of course, can be related, of course, to the prestige of the Arabic language, but also to the idea that this term insan becomes the vehicle for a unique conception of man, a very specific Islamic conception of man, and that's why the language incorporates that term. So if we look to the Arabic root, it has many meanings: to be sociable, to be on intimate terms, to be used to, and to be familiar with, and hence to know. Okay, we are familiar with something, you know something, to perceive, to sense, to recognize, and so on. The Semitic root has to do with man, but also like the Hebrew enosh, but also with the idea of to be sociable and also to be weak. We will see how this is relevant to our discussion, and to be ill. So that's what the comparative Semitic approach tells us. Derived words from the word Insan are uns. Gregory Van Dam yesterday repeatedly referred to this term, which means intimacy, and so it has somehow a meaning that can be related to that of wali. The root of wali is also of the idea of being intimate, of being intimate friends, and so on. Then we have ins, which is a collective noun for the human race. This is often contrasted with, for example, jinn, a collective noun for the jinn race. And related to this is the word unas, people, also found in the form nas, and a word that is used as a technical term, also in Sufism, nasut, the human or physical realm. And of course, the word insan, where the an is a suffix, so it's added to the root. The root is, as we've seen, amza, noon, and sin, for those who know Arabic. And of course, also the word insaniya, which doesn't only mean humanity in a broad sense, but it also means politeness, civility, and so forth and so on. This is very common in many languages. The word humanity carries positive meaning. Now, when we go to the Quran, the term has, in term Insan, has multiple occurrences. It's a very frequent term in the Quran. There is even a surah which is named after the word Insan, Surah Al-Insan, number 76. But we might be disappointed at this point to discover that the very term that is used in the expression Insan al-Kamil is treated in a not so positive light in the Quran. The Quran is not particularly complimentary about man, about his nature, when the word insan is used. So these are all cases when the word insan is used, and then it is defined by some adjective or some verb. And I only quoting some of them. Okay, so insan is called da'if, weak. Again, this is relevant to the Semitic root we have just seen. It's called ya'us, despairing, and kafur, ungrateful, zalum, unjust, and kafar, unthankful, khasim mubin, manifest adversary, ajul, hasty, qatur, stingy, akthar shayin jadalan, prone to dispute, zalum, and jahul, unjust and ignorant. Again, ya'us and kanut, cast down and desperate. Kafur mubin, clearly ungrateful. Halur, impatient. Kanut, ungrateful. Or it is defined by a verb like yatra, he transgresses, and even by an all verse, which is also an all expression, which sounds like a curse. The Quran curses man. And he says, perish man, how unthankful he is. Kutil al-insanu ma akfaruhu. And these are only some of the passages. In other passages, the same words are repeated in these or other combinations. And also the Quran always reminds man of his humble origin. Okay, so many passages refer to the fact that he was created from clay, from a blood clot, from a sperm drop, and so forth and so on. But the Quran also reminds us that things might be different or might have been different in the past for Insan. So these are three quotations from the Quran that again have been already referred to. Surah An-Nas, Surah Al-Asr, sorry. Indeed, mankind, Insan, is in loss, fi khusrin. But here is the difference. Save those who believe and do good works, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to endurance. In another surah, we have certainly created man, al-insan, in the best of stature. Fi ahsani taqwim. So we hear here that, of course, the insan is fi khusrin, but his original state was ahsani taqwim, the best stature. Then we returned him to the lowest of the low. The lowest of the low, as per Safirin, except for those who believe and do righteous deeds. And then here comes the reward, for they will have a never-ending reward. So we see how man was, how man became, but also how man can go back to the original state and be rewarded for that. And lastly, of course, the surah where the Amana is mentioned, which clearly states the centrality and the importance and the unique place of man in the creation, because we offered the trust, al-Amana, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they refused to carry it and were afraid of it. And man, al-Insan, so these are all passages where the word Insan is used, carried it. Surely is sinful and very foolish. And we heard an explanation of this very beautiful one by from Gregory yesterday. Okay, so we are approaching the end. So the term Insan is connected with multiple possibilities and degrees within it. This is a point that is qualified by Ibn Arabi by using two terms, by adding two adjectives to the word Insan. So Ibn Arabi speaks of the Insan al-Kamil, the perfect man, versus the Insan al-Hayawan, the animal human. Okay, perfect human and the animal human, which are, of course, different aspects, different possibilities, different degrees of inside the notion of Insan. They express the superior versus inferior aspect of man, the inner versus the outer dimension of man, and again, the Insan aspect versus the Nisyan, the forgetfulness. Also. And Professor Karic reminds us that in colloquial Bosnian, now the word for man in Bosnian, like many other Slavic languages, is čovjek, or in the Slavic, or an alternative word related to that. But in a common expression in colloquial Bosnian is when somebody behaves improperly. He says, in Bosnian, we say to him to this day, "Ponašaj se kao insan, a nemoj biti hajvan." Behave like a human being and not like an animal. So again, within the Islamic civilization, these two concepts of the possibilities of man being an insan in a proper sense, and the hajvan and just the physical, the basics, the inferior sense, are very well rooted into the common life of people in the Islamic world, also called Islamic world. I see some questions. I don't know if they're there for me. Okay. Okay, can we see this? Okay, we will see this after maybe. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So, a very interesting interpretation, and we are approaching the end, of the word Insan by Ibn Arabi is connected with the eye. So Ibn Arabi says, Ibn Arabi points out the specific meaning that the word Insan has in Arabic as the pupil of the eye. The complete expression is Insan al-Ain, the pupil of the eye. Now that's a derivation which is very common in many languages, including our languages, English, Italian, and so forth. And it's based on this. The derivation of pupil from man is quite common in many languages, including English, and explained because of the small reflected human image seen when looking into someone's eye. So when you look into someone's eye, you see yourself reflected into the eye of the other. And so the word pupil in Italian and English comes from the Latin word pupilla, which means little girl or little doll, equivalent to the Greek kore, girl, doll, puppet, which means, of course, both girl and pupil. The Hebrew as well, Ishon, the diminutive of man, and even the word purusha, if you look in the Sanskrit vocabulary, has also the meaning of pupil. So another convergence, interesting one. So why it is important? Why is this meaning, as we said at the beginning, very often is not the primary and evident meaning of the word that attracts the attention of Ibn Arabi, but it's always very often a hidden one, a secondary one, a derived one, perhaps in many ways. So those who are interested in the ways in which Ibn Arabi applies etymology, his etymological practice to his hermeneutics, can perhaps refer to those two articles that I have written, that you find on my academia page, and they are open source, so everybody can read them. Why is it important, this notion of Insan and Insan as I? Because Ibn Arabi develops it into the notion of Insan as being God's I. So Insan is not an I, it's God's I. So in the Fusus al-Hikam, for example, of course, polysemy plays a key role within the linguistic explanation offered by Ibn Arabi. And in the chapter of Adam, Ibn Arabi explains that man is called Insan because he is the pupil through which the real looks at his creation and has mercy on them. فَإِنَّهُ بِي يَنْظُرُ الْحَقِّ, or حَقُّ is the subject, إِلَى خَلْقِهِ فَيَرْحَمُهُمْ. Okay, so through which the real looks at his creation and has mercy on them. And we can make three small observations. The first one is that this idea of Insan as Basir, endowed with sight, which has specific Quranic references. Okay, the word Insan is used in the passage of the Quran, which said that he was made Basir and Sami, endowed with sight and hearing. The second one is that, of course, because he looks at his creation through to his eye, which is man. It also implies that Insan is a mediator, okay, between the real and the creation. And the third observation we can make is that this is the eye through which, okay, the real looks at his khalq, but we know the khalq from the famous hadith of the hidden treasure was created only in order to God to know himself. So God, or the real, through man, which is his eye, sees himself. The real sees himself through the man, which is the eye. So, final remarks. It has been noted that when the word Basha is mentioned in the Quran, no judgment is implied. So as we've seen, when the Quran uses the word Basha, is always just a man. Whereas as sin, this is definitely not the case with Insan, to which a severe judgment is often reserved. Although there are other terms related to man and human being that are put in a better light in the Quran, or at least treated in a non-judgmental way, the term Insan is the one that offers the widest range of possible meanings and interpretation, encompasses all the complexity and potentiality of the human condition, what man is, was, could be, should be, etc., and encapsulates all the best and the worst of humankind. All this makes the term Insan the perfect term from the notion of the perfect man. Thank you.